Hello, everyone. It's loud. I'm Kevin Berry. I do Nova Launcher, and I'm here to talk to you today about a history of Android launchers. So Android's kind of unique in that it lets the user or OEMs customize the primary interface you have to the phone. And so that's great for people like me that can develop these apps, and it's great for the users like you who can use my app or another app to change it. So I want to talk about how the current launcher looks, how it got that way, and the different influences it's had. So this is Pixel Launcher with Android Q, and you can see the basic structure of there's widgets, there's the notification badge on Gmail, there's the pop-up shortcut menu. When you long press, you have new conversation or maybe recent conversations, folders, dock icons, search bar, the sliding vertical app drawer, which Google's gone away from and come back to, and then Google Now or Feed or Discover, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to go with Google Now because it's muscle memory. So first, the first public beta, Android Milestone 3, there was not much here. In general, there was not much here. For the launchers, not much either. No touch, no desktop aside from seeing a wallpaper. It was really just a dock and then a folder with all your applications. Milestone 5 got a bit funky. It looks kind of like Window Maker or Next Step. It had this concept of a dock, and then it could expand other things. And then we went back to something that looks basically like what we have today. So this was Android 0.9, but it looked more or less like this up through Android 2.0. And we have a lot of what we have. We had back then a lot of what we have today. We had widgets, search bar, desktop icons. We had a form of folders. They've gone away and changed, but they were there. Sliding app drawer, but there's no dock. Yeah, so 1.0, 1.5, 1.6, 2.0, there wasn't that much changes, except Cupcake had 1.5 had live folders. These are pretty forgotten, but live folders were a kind of neat idea that instead of having just a folder with your own icon, your own apps in there, an app could provide a live folder. The user could choose that at their desktop, and it could contain contacts. This was basically what the pop-up shortcut menu is today, but they had a form of it back then. It was hard to discover and was not widely used. So Eclair was a big milestone, Eclair 2.1. 2.0, the launcher was basically the same. 2.1, we had this new thing. They had forked the original launcher code into what they called Launcher 2. They had this app drawer with this, if you remember the conveyor belt effect where the apps kind of went off in the distance. And this was done using RenderScript, and RenderScript at that time had a actual rendering component, which was, I don't know if it's marked experimental. It was essentially experiment, and they killed it. But they were using the launcher as a test bed, and they were doing some effect that users wanted. So there's a whole lot of demand for this Launcher 2, the Nexus 1 launcher, on all the previous devices. And OEMs were also starting to do more things at this point. So Motorola did resizable widgets before anyone else did. HTC did scrollable widgets, again, before anyone else. Samsung did folders in the app drawer, which they still do today, and Google doesn't. And basically everyone did notification badges to kind of match what iPhone was doing. And then we had custom launchers. So Helix Launcher was there, but ADW Launcher and Launcher Pro captured the hearts of a lot of users at this time period. ADW Launcher was open source, it shipped as default with CyanogenMod, and it was, the idea was we're going to take the Launcher 2, the Eclair, the Nexus 1 launcher, and give it to everyone. And then Launcher Pro was a similar idea, but it's we're going to give HTC Sense to everyone. Go Launcher was right there at the beginning too, and it was copying all the good features of ADW and Launcher Pro, and it was completely free. But there's a lot of suspicion because the Go apps were known for being filled with ads and spyware, and they were not widely liked. So there was the things people were asking for, like here you can see Launcher Pro with the Gmail widget, and so that's scrollable. It felt like HTC Sense, but you didn't need HTC Phone to have it. You could also add dock icons. You could customize the number of desktop pages from the default 5 up to 7 or 9. You customize the grid size and icon themes. Icon themes have been a really important thing for launchers and for users that want to customize their phone for a long time, and it started more or less back then. There was also not launchers. So these were apps that acted kind of like a launcher, but they didn't default when you press the home button. So I did Widget Locker before I did Nova Launcher. And Widget Locker was a hacky way of replacing your lock screen with something that had widgets on it, and it had normal icons. And I based it off the Eclair Launcher 2 source code. So all the like drag and drop functionality and handling widgets, I got that for free by basing off the Launcher 2. Wave Launcher was it was Palm OS inspired, so it was like a docket at the bottom of your screen, and anywhere you could swipe up and you see this cool effect and you could pick apps. And then there was QuickDesk and several others like it where they were just like a little thing hidden in the corner. You could swipe it out and find your apps or widgets. So these were also interesting in that it's not something you'd see. I mean, you'd see it on like desktop timers. It's not something you'd see on an iPhone for sure. That Apple wouldn't allow such a thing and wouldn't encourage such a thing, whereas Android embraced it. Froyo and Gingerbread, minor refinements, and then Launcher Pro. Anyone remember this announcement? It's like a meme at this point. Launcher Pro announced he's going to do a rewrite. Fadi, the developer, he's a very talented developer, and he said the code he based it off of was from AOSP, and it just wasn't meant for what he's trying to do with it. And he has this idea that he's going to rewrite it from scratch because who knows launchers better than him. And he pushed this, and he kept working on it, and I really believe he was, but it never shipped. And he was a great developer, but the answer to who knows launchers better than him is Google. And the reason that the launcher code is so annoying and complex is because it has to handle all these edge cases. And so I don't know how far he would have gotten with his rewrite, but it's a huge undertaking. So this was basically the death of Launcher Pro. And a lot of people still today, when I release a Nova update, people will comment like, I'm still waiting for the Launcher Pro rewrite. ADW Launcher also went through a transition. This is positive, though. ADW Launcher X was released in parallel with the normal ADW Launcher. X was closed source, and it had extra features, and it cost money. So it did annoy some users, but it was vital for Android web developer to be able to continue working on it. Then we had Honeycomb. Honeycomb was weird. They had a whole new launcher, but they didn't sell a lot of tablets, so there wasn't a lot of demand for custom launchers for this aspect ratio, this screen size. But here they killed the live folders, which were never popular anyway. They also killed normal folders, but they added these new widgets designs. So we have scrollable widgets, and we have these collection widgets, which didn't really take off, but you could have a gallery, you could flip through, and it had all these like, holographic effects as you're doing it. Then ice cream sandwich and Jelly Bean and Kit Kat. So this was a nice, fresh paint for Android. This launched the Galaxy Nexus. Everyone liked this launcher, except for little things like, I don't want that search bar up there, or I want 7 icons in the dock, or I need more rows. So there was so much demand to take this launcher and change it. And that's where Nova Launcher came in. So Nova wasn't the first custom launcher for ice cream based off the ice cream sandwich source. But the previous ones, they would either take the APK and modify like the XML files in it and reassemble it so you could have a bigger grid, but it's hard-coded for that grid. It'd be named like launcher2_9x9 grid.apk. And there was also some source mods, but again, they were like hard-coding specific customizations. Nova was the first to actually give these customization controls to you. And there was a lot of demand for it. So I released this as a public beta on XDA. This was before the Android market. It was the Android market at the time. It was before the Play Store's beta system. And then when I launched, I also went for a $4 price point. I didn't like having the app free at all. I wanted it just to be a paid app. But the culture around launchers, partially because of ADW and Launcher Pro, was that launchers were free and extras were their own paid thing. But launchers didn't have ads aside from Go Launcher, and they were free and completely functional. So this scared me. I really thought that I'm not going to have a lot of people converting, but it worked. I'm cutting heads out selling Widget Locker. So Widget Locker was already earning me enough that I quit my day job and was just doing that full time. Nova Launcher started outselling Widget Locker, and at this time there was only the Galaxy Nexus, which officially ran ice cream sandwich. So there's just one device, but there was so much demand, and it was such a popular product at the right time that it sold very well. But the development of Nova Launcher was different than a normal app. So at that time, the Launcher 2 source code had a bunch of references to private APIs. They were all like the @hide you'll sometimes see if you're browsing AOSP. One example is that they had set fast alpha. So instead of the normal set alpha call, they'd have set fast alpha, which skipped the invalidate. So if you're doing a number of these transforms, because the launcher had all these new animations, you'd have set fast alpha to 0.5, set fast translation x to 0.1, set fast translation y to 0.1, and then at the end you manually call invalidate. I wanted to keep these optimizations. I don't want to ship something to users that's slower than the stock launcher, but if I depend on those existing, then when Jelly Bean or whatever ships and removes them, my app is going to crash. So I went through and I changed all these to use reflection to call it, and if it didn't exist, call the slow method. And that worked, that when Jelly Bean shipped, one of my competitors crashed on day one because he was using all these private APIs, and Nova didn't. It did have rendering issues though, but it mostly worked. There was also the animations. I was new to doing animations and to even like seeing jank being drop frames. So my users would report that like, this is slow when I use this transition effect and I'm scrolling between home screens, it looks really laggy. And I do it on my phone and it looked completely fine. And I had to train myself to actually see that, if it's not 60 frames per second, it looks bad. And then I'd have two Galaxy Nexus next to each other and I'd be scrolling through at the same time trying to see what changes I could make to improve it. And it was mostly talking at Google I/O to Roman Gee about hardware acceleration that I learned what I'm actually doing intentionally rather than just guess and check. Icon themes, as I mentioned, these were really important to users. ADW Launcher had its API, Launcher Pro had its, Go had its, and then all these theme developers who were mostly artists, not programmers, they had to add this like intent filters and add different XML to support this. And icon themes, at that time they were smaller, but they'd still be 1,000 icons. Today they'll be like 6,000 icons. So just managing XML to map an app to an icon is a ton of work. I didn't want to make a new Nova API enforceable to do this unless I was going to do a big step upgrade. So I decided to just standardize on Go Launcher's API, which the other developers started to do at that point too. The API is really bad. It's there's no error checking. Instead, it's in XML, but instead of doing @drawable / which you could get ID auto completion and on compilation error if it was wrong, it drops that off and you just type the name. So there's tons of themes out there where they reference icons that don't exist. They reference package names that have invalid characters in them. So it's not a good API, but it works and it means that it's standardized. Then we start getting emails, and at this time it was just me. So I start getting emails, and one thing is that other apps will, they don't behave, and then the user contacts them. They say, oh, we don't support custom ROMs or launchers. This is bullshit. The launcher's not doing anything that's going to affect your app. If it's a widget, okay, maybe it's my fault, or if it's something with shortcuts. But if the user taps your icon and opens your app, it's on you now. I didn't do anything. So this is a mentality that this still happens today. It has gotten a bit better. But it's sometimes, custom launchers are seen as like this really hacky thing like a custom ROM, and they're not. They're just an app. They're using official APIs. They're simple. They're part of Android, so you should support them. There's nothing to do. Just don't tell people you don't support them. Then we had Google Now Launcher. This was good with regard to the not supporting third-party launchers because now Google had a third-party launcher. On any device that not a Nexus device, you can install this from the Play Store. It also meant there was a lot of changes to the code. They moved Launcher 2 to Launcher 3, and now they want it to be a Play Store app, so they're going to remove all those @hide APIs, and it's going to be an official, backwards compatible. The AOSP code isn't just assuming that the API level is the same as what it's compiled against. It actually has backwards compatible support. And they also changed the interface a lot. A big one was they had unlimited desktop pages. And part of this was they put the Google Now page there, and they had all your desktop pages afterwards. And so you could just keep adding them. And the default page didn't need to be in the center, which they wanted to do before, which made it awkward to add pages. But OEMs didn't really want to use it. They wanted to have their own interface. And another side is I don't think Google realized working with the OEMs is going to have its own issues. Nova Launcher comes pre-installed on Razer devices, not Motorola Razer, but Razer, the gaming company. And so that's kind of given me a chance to see what OEMs need to deal with. And so like one example that came up recently is they're shipping an update, and on AT&T phones, they're using a dialer with a package named Code Aurora, and on all the other devices, they switched using Google's dialer. And then when they're upgrading users to the system update, they need the launcher to migrate all the existing shortcuts. So I added like 5 lines of code to handle this migration, and that's no big deal for me to do. But Google's not going to do that for some OEM. So it's kind of a liability if OEMs ship with Google Now Launcher, they can't count on Google to change anything, and they don't have the APK signature or anything. They can't change it themselves. Then Google had the Launcher Client API. This was a way that the Google app could be connected to from another launcher and let the launcher have the Google Now page. This is a really unique way of doing it. It's not technically using any private APIs, but it's kind of making a lot of assumptions. So what happens is that the launcher will connect to the Google app, and it'll share its window token. So the window token is used by the window manager, the Android system, to draw your window, and it's kind of acts as an identity. And so if I share the window token with someone else, that other process can draw with kind of my identity, but I can't even see its content. So the Google app then creates a window in my app, and then I say, okay, I'm scrolling this much, and it moves the screen, moves their window over. It's not perfect. There's no guarantee that things are synchronized on the UI thread. So if you move quickly, you'll see, even in Pixel Launcher, the two screens will move separately. But it was a cool way of getting Google Now into any launcher in theory. But they didn't actually open it up. They restricted it to just system launchers. They had to check for if the launcher is a system app or if the Google app is debuggable. So this locked me out, and it was frustrating for third-party developers. And then at some point, Google released an update, and they changed it to if the client is debuggable. I really believe this is a bug. I didn't want to exactly point it out, but this meant that I could basically do this. A debuggable version of Nova Launcher could connect to the Google app and have the Google Now page. You can't put debuggable apps on the Play Store, so that's why Nova Launcher and almost all the other launchers these days now too have an extra app, a companion app outside the Play Store that's debuggable. So we can connect, the companion can connect to Google, and we can proxy all the commands through. And it's how we get Google Now in launchers. That's the wrong place. Okay, now we had Lollipop. Lollipop was material design. Everything looked new and shiny. Lots of new APIs. And the AOSP launcher changed drastically. So this is kind of like when we went from gingerbread to ice cream sandwich. This is a big transition point for the launcher, and this is a chance for, just like Nova kind of took over for ADW and Launcher Pro, this was a chance for someone to take the launcher market away from Nova. So Action Launcher, they were first to really establish themselves on Lollipop. Chris Lacey killed off Action Launcher 2, which was based on Jelly Bean, and then he released Action Launcher 3 as a new app. It was a good launcher, but this upset a lot of users because they had to pay for it again. And he'd been working on it for years. It's reasonable to charge for upgrades, but it upsets people. Apex Launcher released some updates, but basically they took off 4 years. They just basically recently came back and started working on the Launcher 3 code base. So Nova, I kind of worked on two things in parallel. I tried to grab a bunch of those new changes and bring them into my code base, and then I also tried to grab all of my changes I previously made and put them on top of that code base. And so the later worked. The later won out, but that was easier to do than moving other things over. But it was a lot of work. Marshmallow and Nougat, not too much changing except for shortcuts in Nougat. So this is basically the revival of live folders, and it's similar to what Apple's done with their Force Touch. So you long press on an app and you get shortcuts. There's also security issues with the previous way desktop shortcuts were handled. Before, if you wanted to have a call phone shortcut on your desktop, it worked, but every launcher requires the call phone permission because those are just raw intents. It's a dial intent. The launcher launches just like any other app with the call phone permission could launch. Now shortcuts were tied to the launcher. Only the default launcher can access them, which means that if you wanted to expose some functionality to your app, you don't have to have an open intent that any other app could fire. It's limited just to the launcher, presumably through user interaction. Oreo, we got adaptive icons, so it changes the way you make the icons, so the launcher can change the shape of them, or the OEM. And we got notification badges. Notification badges, as I mentioned, OEMs have been adding forever. Custom launchers have been adding forever. But it was really messy. The apps don't expose an unread count. And on iPhone, they struggle with it too, is that apps artificially put big unread counts just to get your attention. So Google went with just showing a simple dot, and it's only if you have a notification in the shade. Just before Google released this, I was doing basically the same thing. I was scrapping my old method of gathering counts from every app in hacky ways, and instead looking just the notification shade and not even worrying about a number, just showing like the person's face that contacted you. Android Pie integration of system UI. So now this is like what Google Now was before, is that was something custom launchers couldn't get and wanted. This is Pixel Launcher. You can see the dock down at the bottom while you're in recent apps. Custom launchers can't do that. And part of that reason is technical, that these APIs are, they're not finalized yet, they're all private. But part of it is also, part of it could be that Google wants to assert more control over the platform. So I'm hopeful that they're eventually going to allow custom launchers to integrate with recents. It'd be great for me, it'd be great for users too, in the sense that recents it's essentially a launcher, and then the launcher can customize it just like users like to be able to customize their home screen. So maybe instead of having horizontal, they want vertical. Maybe they want more actions when they long press on it. A lot of people complain about Pi. It's harder to do split window. That could be easier. A launcher can make that easier. So what's next? Android Q has this concept of roles, and there's a launcher role. And there's nothing I could find that's actually assigned anywhere here. But in theory, the launcher is going to have extra permissions because it's set as the default launcher. They might just be using this for the shortcuts they're interested in Nougat, but I'm hopeful that eventually they'll use roles to get the launcher to access the system UI. There's also slices. So slices were released, they're in the support library. They're released with, well, I forgot. But they're basically what you see in a notification shade. It's a simple structure of a title, summary, maybe an image, and another app or the system UI can display this. So notifications aren't currently using slices. The only place using slices is Google search to show like content from one of your apps. But the idea Google has is that eventually this would be the standard way that apps share UIs between each other. So it'd be used in notifications, it'd be used for widgets. What's cool about this for launchers is that the app provides the content, but we control the skin around it. So we could have a dark theme or a light theme, and that would be up to the launcher and the user. Or we could have reshape it. So I'm hopeful that widgets take off using slices, and then it'll open some interesting theming possibilities. There's also obviously Google starting to do some AI stuff with predicting apps you want to use in the launcher. This is an area that could be hard for third-party launcher developers to keep up with because AI is complex. But it also could be interesting to see, what does a customizable launcher with AI mean? As users want to exert more control, and sometimes the AI is just a black box. So maybe users want to be able to control how the AI ranks things, or maybe they don't even want the AI; they just want to pin their own apps there. Thanks for listening. I don't think question and answer really works here, but please find me if you have any questions. I'd love to talk about launchers or anything else Android. I'm Kevin. I don't really do social media much, but you can email me, kevin@teslacoilsw.com. Thanks.